parking. Parking lots. And let's do some quick intros since we're all new. I am Julia Gustafson, one of the new committee members. Seth, do you want to go next?
I am Seth Brandenberger. I am the chair of the Business Improvement District and the Business Improvement District committee member.
I'm Sandy Scholl, the business rep.
I'm Joan Taylor, residential parking rep.
My name is Mo Heron. I'm the parking field coordinator.
Noah Goldman, transportation systems superintendent.
John Mergenthaler, and you
So Dave is my boss.
Okay.
I'm Elroy's.
Okay.
James and John. I'm parking. So
I don't know my deputy versus
David Elroy and I oversee more than just parking.
Yeah.
What was your name again?
Chris.
Chris.
You want to introduce yourself?
David Knopke, the director of transportation systems.
And we have 4 of our committee members, so we have a quorum. So I think we can get started. Minutes, since our minutes are on YouTube, they're recorded. David, can you tell me, do we need to approve them if they're just a recording?
So we'll have to do, since last time was more of an informational meeting, and same as mostly today, except for some bylaws. We'll have to record that the officer election that we did.
Okay.
So
so we do need to have some written
we'll
minutes?
have to do some action minutes.
Okay, for that September meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that'll just be like major milestones. If you do something like that, or just so that there's a written record so people
So Sandy's our secretary, so if Sandy and I type those up, do we just send them to you to post them? Or who do we send them to?
We'll post them. So you'll have to send them to me and then they'll be on the agenda.
Okay, so that then we would approve September and
And we can ask
October
Danae.
and November.
Yeah, exactly. And announce it in minutes when she gets here.
Okay, so let's move on from that agenda item. And let's just dive right in for updates from city staff on Helena Parking.
So we'll just update some quickly on some things that are going to be talked about in our PowerPoint. The Helena Parking has essentially moved to this building. We still have some equipment that's over in the chamber building, but that won't move until, or that won't get thrown away until we turn it off. Jokingly on that. And then John is our front desk person who will be out front there taking parking tickets, answering questions on parking and that stuff. James is the back office. He's in charge of operations and maintenance. And then our admin that we had hired, she resigned last week unexpectedly. Came in and she left. So, hopefully she is doing well in her new endeavors. So that position is currently being advertised right now. So.
And you're recording this now, right? You're recording this meeting now?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure.
You don't want to take notes?
No, I do not.
Oh,
Join us.
I got that seat.
4 minutes late.
Yes, mark that down, please.
Make sure that goes in the minutes.
I was in another meeting and I kept trying to say, okay, I gotta go. I left my pen. So I ran in a flurry of paperwork on my way out the door. So apologies to everyone.
Want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. For those of you that don't know who I am Danae Claiborne. I'm the clerk of the commission. So I think I was asked to speak to things that are on this email that I haven't sent paperwork.
I'm Julia.
Oh, hi, Julia. Yes.
Glad you can join us. We're just on the update from city staff about Helena Parking. sorry, were you saying you're trying to pull up a PowerPoint? Is that?
I will be here in a second, but we're gonna go to bylaws discussion and review. Is the next item.
Okay, so was that, so you wanna move the updates from city staff until after we talk about bylaws?
Yeah.
Great, let's do that. Let's talk about bylaws. So, bylaws were posted. These are draft ones that were put together for us. Hopefully, committee members have had a chance to look at them. I know I have a couple suggested changes, some small things, but I'd like to open up to the rest of the committee if they have any changes they'd like to see to these bylaws. Any committee members? All right, well then I will share my notes. In the resolution that created this committee, in the city, there was a little 3-part sentence about giving an update to the city commission in December, under the duties of. I wondered about adding those to the bylaws, and I can read that sentence here in just a second. So in the bylaws, if you scroll down, Article 3, Section 2, Part B. It, sorry, David, if you would mind scrolling down to Article 2, Section B, there you go. You see those 4 bullet points, those are what we're supposed to be doing. And then there's also a little blurb after that in the resolutions that said, accomplishing the above objectives, the Parking Advisory Committee will issue to the City Commission a report in December of the first year following the adoption of this resolution, and December of each year thereafter. The report will provide 3 to 5 recommendations for consideration by the City Commission and to be vetted by city staff at the direction of the city manager. I'm thinking it might be helpful to put that in our bylaws, so all the stuff is in one place, but I would look at these how bylaws should look. Does that matter?
Sure, so, thank you, Madam Chair. I will tell you, I'm not opposed to putting this in the bylaws, or putting that information in there. What I would ask is it just for consistency's sake? Yeah. Here's the only reason I would be a little reticent at this point of duplicating that there is what we're finding. This is a new process that we're developing with the commission right now is these annual reports. We've never done it this way before. And so what we're finding is we want that report to the commission to work with the board and committees schedule and for consideration for staff for the budgetary process. And so while we want to believe that we're absolutely going to hit that mark and align with the budget discussions for the commission, exactly with what's in the resolution, we're not sure at this point if that's going to be the exact target month that will work best. So before we add that information to the bylaws, I would say, let's try it with just the resolution for right now. We can always amend these bylaws through another process later on, but for right now, it might be worth giving it some time to try it this first year with you all and see if that month works for everybody in that time. I just, for background information, I would tell you the reason that we wanted to align that annual report from each board or committee with the budgetary process, that is because even policy decisions can have a financial impact. And so the more that we can involve the boards and committees recommendations within that budget timeline, which typically really gets kickstarted in April-ish, March, right? Is that really when we start having those meetings?
Discussions.
Yeah, the meetings, right?
Yeah.
But the
Place, but
sure. I guess what I'm saying is that for the commission to really start getting those reports to them and start digging into the budget reports that the staff is bringing forward, that's all happening in those public meetings in March and April. So the more that staff can take your recommendations into account before those months, that was the goal. But I would say if you're willing to just hold off on adding those to the bylaws until we try it this year, that might be worth. That might be something we need to modify later on down the road. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Any committee members have any thoughts on that? Okay, then I'm fine with that. My second suggestion, the next two are pretty small bookkeeping ones. Article 5, Section 1, change the meeting time to 4 from 4:30. You're all good with meeting time. So the second Thursday. Yeah. And then my last suggested change is in Article 5, Section 5, Part B. The bylaws say the agenda must be posted 7 days before the meeting. And in one of the city handouts, it just says 48 hours. Is that the minimum from the city?
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. 48 hours is in an attorney general opinion, it is the absolute minimum that a public agency can post a public agenda. And so what we would like, the standard policy would be that 7 days for boards and committees. That's what the city commission aims to. We're working ever so diligently to roll that back. It used to be the standard. And the commission feels pretty strongly that we should be meeting that 7-day mark. The 48 hours was to inform staff, quite frankly, that anything beyond 48 hours within that window of 48 hours is not to be posted as a public meeting because it would be against law, basically continuing law.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Sandy?
That's the question. This is Sandy. You loosely kind of put in sometimes committee, sometimes board on the bylaws. Is that, like it says the board's name is Parking Advisory Committee.
Sure, we can
So-
go through and do those
I mean, is that-
changes.
because we're not a board, right?
Board and committee for our purposes here at City of Helena are essentially synonymous.
Then if they are, then okay.
Yeah, we can go through as these are draft. We'll do a kind of a final run through for grammar and all that kind of stuff, and we should clarify this a little bit as administrative errors.
Okay. So I'm fine with keeping it 7 days since that's the standard the city's trying to meet. Any other changes, or I guess I have a process question. As chair, can I make motions or do? No, I didn't think so. Okay, if anybody would like to move to approve these bylaws with the one change as discussed, that might be the time to do it.
Before we do it real quick.
Okay, yeah, more
Um,
comments, please.
Is there a piece I lost track here? So the 7 days is for putting it on the website for the agenda. What about minutes? When do our minutes have to be there and put up for public?
That's a great question. So thank you, Madam Chair. Susan?
Sandy.
Sandy, shoot, sorry.
Got this part.
Sandy. That's a great question. So it depends on the process and minutes, the statute doesn't really define the timeline in which you need to post your minutes by. They need to be done in a timely manner. That's as strict as it is. So what I would advocate for, if you all, are you secretary?
That'd be me.
You're talking.
By default.
Yeah, perfect.
Seth wasn't
Yay,
here.
Sandy, you're the most important person in this room.
Well, that's the hard part, that's the problem. Okay.
So what we are aiming for administratively out of our office is to template and make everything as easy as it could possibly be for you. And we were happy to work with you personally. The deputy clerk has kind of got it nailed down to a fine art on how to do those templated action minutes based on the reporting. So what we're hoping to make it as easy as we can so that there should never be a concern about getting those on the agenda for the next meeting, which is it's monthly, correct? Yeah. If that's an issue at all, then please talk to us at the clerk's office and we'll be happy to help you. But as statutorily, there's not really a timeline. It's just the expectation would be you'd have last month's meeting minutes on that agenda for approval the next month.
I just want to make sure the public has enough time to.
Yeah,
look at
absolutely.
things.
And that's a great reason that the 7-day rule comes into place so that the public and the commissioners, quite frankly, who will pay attention to these minutes as well, have time to consume those before you all meet. Are
Well,
you,
maybe we look at the minutes and the agenda following the same 7 days.
You mean,
Yeah.
as far
Says
as,
the agenda must be available to the public by 7 days. We also add, and the minutes also do the same thing. I don't know.
So the minutes would be, if you have if you have minutes to be approved at that upcoming meeting. So those would be just like I added the bylaws and those were posted with the agenda. The minutes would be posted with the agenda so that anybody could review those prior to the meeting.
so this is an internal process question, I think, is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Thank you. I didn't quite understand. So really, that would be a question between the chair.
It'd be our goal, maybe.
Yeah,
If
vice
we're
chair.
doing the agenda, let's put in the minutes, let's whatever, all at once and stick with the same deadline, whatever that is.
Right, so Sandy, if you're the secretary and you're gonna work with your chair and vice chair, the goal would be that you get those items in addition to any other work product that would be hosted on the agenda. So if you're gonna be talking about a particular topic and it's gonna have a memo from a community member or public comment of any kind that's what's submitted in written form, all of those things be collected by the chair and the secretary and the officers of the board and posted with that packet. So you may need, it may mean that you need to have your minutes into the vice chair and chair a couple of days in advance of that 7 days, so everybody has a chance to review them. But I mean, it's a group approval of the minutes. That's where you'll have that discussion about modifications to the minutes in real time and then approve the minutes as amended or approve the minutes as they stand. So I think I answered your question.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, it's been, it's video. And I'm gonna pick what I perceive, Julie and I are gonna pick the important pieces. So, anyway, it'll be a challenge.
I
Yeah.
think that that's worth having a discussion with myself and Alex Montiel,
We'll talk.
the deputy clerk. It's actually set up pretty easily for you, in theory.
Good.
So,
Well, it'll be a good test model for you.
yes, I love it.
AI, brief and simple.
I wanna just pause, cause we have a couple online attendees, can we see them up there too, or only
I can only put one thing up.
at a time?
At a
Okay,
time.
can we hear them?
They're on and they're panelists, so if they wanna talk, they can just turn their mics on.
Okay, so I wanna pause since Christopher is a committee member and make sure that he knows we're talking about the bylaws and if he
Yes,
has
this is Christopher. I've been tuned in. Thank you.
Chris, can you hear us?
Hello, yes, this is Christopher. Can you guys hear me?
So could I ask a question?
Joan,
before-
yeah, please go ahead.
This is Joan. We're talking about changes to the bylaws and talking about adopting them today. So if we adopt them, then we can add those changes, like the clarifying when they clean it up and clarify board or committee. Then we will approve those at a later time, including what the sentence you wanted inserted to. So is that-
Yes, that's
I-
correct. It is 90.
My question on the timeline for bylaws. Do you have a comment on that?
Sure, if you don't mind.
Great.
So you can form your motion to include her edits to the bylaws. For the edits that you might want to include.
Okay, but you, what was your name?
Danae.
Danae. You said that you'll consider some of those changes at a later date once we see, like in a year, to add the.
Oh,
Is that?
I see where the confusion is. Thank you. So,
Speak.
as far as the edits to the bylaws that have been proposed thus far, it sounds like they're more administrative changes, like the 4 p.m. Start time. The additional sentence about the, it doesn't sound,
I think it's only 4 p.m. right now. But
okay, yeah, so
For me.
currently it sounds like there wasn't need to move forward with any edits to the, adding the sentence you're referring to, the annual review being added to the
Right.
bylaws. Is that still something you want considered at this time? Okay, so we'll pull that. And then the other change was,
7 days versus 48, and I'm fine keeping it with 7 days. So really, if we're looking at the bylaws today, the only change on the table would be 4 from 4:30. So I think we could make a motion and approve them today if everyone's comfortable, then we don't have to do it again in November.
apologize. My recommendation would be that you table it if there were substantive changes to the bylaws, and thus far it sounds like it's mostly just administrative stuff.
Did Chris have any comments online?
He's trying to get my work.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Jovan Wagner.
She's with Montana Free Press. Okay. All right, committee members, any other questions about the bylaws or discussion on the bylaws? Okay, any of the three of you would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the bylaws as written with the change to 4 p.m. second Thursday for the meeting time, and accepting grammatical review by the clerk's office.
Is there a second for that
This
motion?
is Sandy, a second.
Alright, Sandy seconds. Any additional committee discussion, and do I need to do public comment for bylaws? All right, any public comment about our bylaws change approval? Great, hearing no public comment, we have a motion to accept the bylaws with the proposed amendment of 4 p.m. and grammatical changes. All those in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing no opposition, we have approved the bylaws. Great. Let's go on to our next agenda item, which is actually to back up to an update from staff. And actually, while you figure that out, David, I'll have.
I'm just trying to find my mouse.
Oh. Alicia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure.
You missed introductions, so you might as well take a moment.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I am Alicia Ryan. I'm the new executive director of the Helena Business Improvement District. So glad to meet all of you and seeing you hard at work, and I apologize for being late.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so this agenda just pretty much mirrors the committee's agenda. So we'll spend much time on that. So just to take a quick history, in 1970, that's when the Parking City Commission established itself as the Parking Commission. In 1991, they felt that a separate parking commission created to create the jurisdiction over the parking district. In 2000, it appointed the Downtown Business Improvement District Board of Trustees as the Helena Parking Commission. In 2019, they repealed a resolution and also amended a couple of them to facilitate what they were moving forward with, which again, in 2019 in April, they repealed the main resolution that created the parking commission. So in essence, between the February and April meeting, they repealed everything before that. So the 2000, the 1991, and 1970. So, and in June of 2019, there was a soft opening to the pay to park. And July of that year it was fully operational for the pay to park. And in January 2020, that's when the first hour free parking was implemented. Primarily due to some public comment, and COVID was still coming out of COVID. So any questions on the history?
When was the parking commission dissolved then? in
2019.
2019. Okay, and is that when this committee?
This committee was created out of just. Give it over to Chris for the budget overview.
So our budget overview, so I gave you guys our last full fiscal year and then what's currently budgeted for this fiscal year. So in FY 24, you can see about 2.3 million in revenue was budgeted, almost 2.5 in expenses. Our actuals came in less than that, about 2.1 in revenue, 2.3 in expenses. And so those differences there, you can see we more or less kept it even across the board on our budget versus our actual. So we were short on revenue about 170,000, but we also spent under on the expense side by 170,000. So essentially still kept in line with the budget that we had outlined. For this fiscal year that we're in now, about a $2 million revenue budget, a $2 million expense budget. Our goal was to keep it balanced so that we didn't have such a large essentially dip into our reserves, because our reserves are not super high at the moment in parking. To give you a little bit of an idea of what makes up some of our revenue, so our meters and our pay to park brings in about 400,000 a year, and the tickets from those areas bring in about 70,000. Our residential permits and the other permits would be garages, lots, any of the on-street permits. So between the two of those, about 1.5 million. And then the tickets in relation to permits, about 40,000 a year. Food fines, about 1,500. There's a little bit of interest in there, here and there, depending on our reserve balance. But that's really the core of what makes up our revenue side of our budget. Our major expenses, so our personnel, so paying James and John and PCOs. Our day-to-day operations, so that's going to be anything from little nuts and bolts that we need to fix things, to different signs, to the equipment that we use, to some of the contractors we use for snow removal in the wintertime. And then our debt service, which would be 15th Street Garage, Jackson Garage, and the pay to park kiosks. As you can see, it's a pretty high debt service every year for those three things. And one of them does fall off in the next year, which is Jackson Street, I believe. It's not a big portion of it, but it's not insignificant either. I think it's about 150,000, somewhere in that range, that we could put back into the operation at that point. But as you can see right now, in this year's budget, there is no cap. There's no large projects that we've budgeted for, and we're balanced straight across, money coming in, money going out. So these unfunded liabilities, deferred maintenance on the facilities, we just had an assessment done on all the garages. And that's what they came back with as essentially either damage or deferred maintenance that needs to be addressed in the 4 garage facilities, about $7.4 million. And then ADA improvements, about 400,000. So those are ongoing. We try to fit some of that into the budget every single year in our regular operations. But there are a lot of things in a lot of the parking facilities that would really require us to put some dedicated money that we're required to do as part of the city's transition. Any questions on?
How come your revenue is lower this year? Is that due to the changes that are proposed?
So it's lower this year because I did a realistic estimate on our revenues this year.
Oh, okay.
So in the past, I think the budget had been done a little more optimistically. You know, going through COVID was a tough part, right? There was a lot of, for lack of a better term, free days, right, that were given during COVID in parking. And then trying to come out of that has been a real struggle to get a lot of that business back. And some of those businesses that bought permits in the past, their workers aren't coming back to work. So unless we had an agreement in place in some way or form, they're just not buying as many permits as they used to be either. So I sharpened our pencil quite a bit on the revenue side to try and be a lot more realistic to what we came into last year. So last year was 2.1, this year's about 2 million. And again, the 2.1, some of that is just timing. So we may get a large annual permit customer to pay like right at the end of the year sometimes. So it can fluctuate a little bit depending on the time of the year. So taking that into account is why it's still a little bit lower than the 2.1. But I think it's a very realistic estimate of what we can expect on an annual basis right now.
Just to add on to that. So in the past, our annual permits were done on the calendar year. And so we were splitting revenues between fiscal years. So depending upon when they paid that, might have fallen into the previous fiscal year or the new fiscal year. So it was hard to budget. So we have now asked all annual permit holders to go onto our fiscal year. So now everybody is, paying by the end of our fiscal year, and they're getting their bills sometime so the money for that fiscal year will be realized within that fiscal year, not split between. And then onto that, additionally to that remote working that some of the businesses have seen downtown. We also have had, as probably a lot of we've had some state agencies move from offices, whether it's another office downtown or in Helena, but there has been a reduction in the amount of permits sold, pre-COVID versus now. But I think some of those are starting to come back with other businesses coming in. Again, it's been tough through the COVID years to see without this roller coaster effect. And now as we come out, we're seeing more remote work, and then different businesses come in. I think we'll start seeing a little bit more stabilized numbers here in the next couple of years.
Okay, I have one other question. I have a couple other questions. Your deferred maintenance does not include any of the parking lots?
It does not.
You mean the surface lots?
The surface lots. And your vacancy from your previous director, is that taken up somewhere else?
That was used, so the previous manager of parking.
Yeah.
So that money was used to basically make our budget balance this year.
Okay. That's where the 100 and
Yeah, so part of the unbalance in the prior year where the expenses were so much higher than the revenue estimate.
that's 171,000.
So, well, no, so the 2,278,000 revenue budget on 24 versus the 2 million, almost 2.5. So part of that, our personnel expense was reduced pretty drastically from 24 to 25 by finding other ways to manage without having to budget that manager position again. So that helped bring us a little more into alignment. So we saved in some places where we could, and that was one of those savings areas. Realigning personnel a little bit saved us about, I think it was somewhere in the range of like $30,000 to $40,000. So we put James in place a little bit higher from where he was, and we added instead of a lower level admin at the time, we had a higher level admin person at the time. So we made some shifts, but overall saved about $30,000 or $40,000 to the budget on the expense side, which helps us come into alignment a little more.
I see. So the parking garage deferred maintenance, that was done by an outside entity, is that right?
Yes.
It went through. Okay, so what about the surface lots? Have you had anybody look at those? Or can you do that? Or how are we going to get to the deferred maintenance on all the surface lots, which is pretty substantial from what I've seen? The landscaping's gone, the pavements are going bad, and the sidewalks are degrading.
Yeah, so I mean the surface lots, I think the biggest issue we have with some of those, they fall into the ADA improvements that we have. A lot of our surface lots have a lot of ADA upgrades that we need to make to them. So I think that's more where we focus on the surface lots. As far as, resurfacing them and making them a little smoother, a little better pavement, things like that. You know, part of the benefit of David and I, and we're being over transportation, we have the streets department. They can't necessarily do the work or pay for it. But parking could pay our streets department if we have the time. And it would be significantly less than paying an outside contractor to come in and resurface it. So there are some things we could do to try and address them and try to keep the costs down while we do it. But again, I think our biggest challenge when it comes to the surface lots at the moment is making sure that we're ADA compliant.
Yeah, I get that. There's a, you know, your entrance aprons coming in with the sidewalks have disintegrated. They don't meet ADA. There's too much cross slope.
Right.
That's a problem. And your landscaping, for instance, your Japanese junipers about died. There's weeds coming up. There's no money for that. I can see right here.
So we can have, you know, James has 2 maintenance guys
Yeah.
that work in the division, you know, so we could have them try to step up a little bit more and on the landscaping front.
Yeah.
You know, weed killer and stuff like that is not too expensive. We could find a place to buy some weed killer. But yeah, any major improvements, you know, replacing those trees and those bushes might be more costly of an avenue. But we could definitely do what we can to make it not such an eyesore, at least.
And to be honest, that evaluation on structures was a budgeted item in last year's budget. That's the reason that we had the money there to do that assessment. This year, as Chris stated, we basically have money to do day-to-day operations. We are, you know, fitting something in where we can, and that's where we're hoping by, you know, restructuring some of parking a little bit, that we'll have a little bit more breathing room come next budget cycle, so that we can start addressing some of the capital improvement issue items.
Can I pause you for a sec for procedure? Can you share this screen so that the online participants can see the PowerPoint?
They should be able to see.
No.
Green button.
Thank you. Great, perfect. All right. Any other budget questions, or should we go to the next slide?
Just seems like we've asked for budget stuff over the years and it seems pretty simplified. I guess I would like sometime having more information about, you know, where are we actually making our money and not making money, and so we can problem solve it either.
Sure.
So
The full account by account budget is available on the city's website.
didn't you look for that?
Down to every line item that we have, and you know, we make it a point in our whole department, not just parking, that we try to even go beyond that. So you know, we have a line, for example, for contracted services. So you'll see a total dollar amount for that line item. But I purposely go into detail that what makes up that dollar amount as much as I can.
Okay.
Whether it's snow removal or whatever it might be that makes up that total number, those details are also in that document online.
Okay, so how do I find that?
So it should be on probably under the finance department's page.
And budgeting.
In budgeting, yeah.
It's actually, I could just confirm, Sandy, Madam Chair, it should be actually available along with all previous budgets for the class with public links.
Oh,
which I
yeah.
can make sure this group has.
Great.
Link to
Yeah,
it.
that'd be good.
I believe that's where she had us move them off. But I will get that information to the group. Okay.
So we went through and just kind of to give a overview of this one's number of permits on the street. There's 490 available on-street permit spaces, 295 active permit holders. 60% of all on-street permit spaces could be utilized by a permit holder. And so if you remember the study that the VIP, the parking had done for they recommended 85% turnover, or have 85% and have 15% turnover, basically so that there's at least one parking space every block as you are looking for parking downtown. You know, we have notable oversold areas of Benton, Lawrence, and Cruz. Undersold are Park Avenue North, Getchell Street, you know, Cruz Central, and Cruz North, which is Lawrence to 11th. Any questions on those?
Yeah, can you just clarify that? Does oversold mean over the 85% of available spots? Like they're 100%
No,
sold, or
100.
they're like 120% sold?
They're like 100, yeah, they're over 100%. So,
Okay. So what does that look like for a permit holder?
so at this time, you know, we haven't had really any complaints with this oversold area, with the in these oversold areas, but it's not something that as we've gone through and really dove into the details over the last year. This was one of the more recent ones where we've gone out and counted all the spaces, verified number of spaces. Because you know, once we get to like the surface lots and the garages, over the years they've been restriped, and we've lost spaces or what have you. The original like 6th Avenue garage was originally spaced striped for 8-foot parking lanes, and they're now 9, but they also have the buffers so that, you know, the door dings, and that was part of public comment. So we went from something like 630 spaces in 6th Avenue to 413, I believe. Yeah, 16 or 13. Yeah. So, you know, losing almost 200 spaces. So we really wanted to be able to get to the point of what do we have, what do we don't have, and we've instituted new basically policies. So, you know, if a surface lot has less than 20 spaces, we're not going to oversell that lot, because the odds are everybody that bought a permit in that lot is more than likely they're going to show up. Where we start having a little bit more places or a little bit more spaces, then you have people out sick, people on vacation, so you can oversell by a little bit, but we're not going to get to the point of some of these areas that were oversold, because, you know, our opinion going forward is if you paid for a permit, then you should have a parking spot when you get there.
So is there signage on all these streets for that are permit parking?
Yeah, it's no notice where permit parking is owned or it's not.
But those permits are for specific areas still. It's not gonna be if I have a permit, I can park.
No, there are for specific areas, you're correct. There we go. So this is the permits in parking lots, 548 available spaces, 537 active permit holders. So as you can see, with our surface lots, we're pretty much at 100% capacity. But if you drive by those lots at any one time, it doesn't appear so. But that's where we get into the quandary of how much do you oversell versus people showing up and not having a space. Now, I can say that some of these areas are being impacted by that remote work that we're seeing by some of the businesses downtown. So that is why you see some of the surface lots and even like the 15th Street parking garage is pretty much empty because they've elected to allow remote work, but they still have parking spaces and they paid for them, so. Any questions on the surface lots?
So the surface lots, some of them are permit only, but then most of them are commingled, you can still pay hourly.
Mhm.
So that factor, you could, if all the surface lots could be full, like the number of permits, you're not reserving permits for hour, or spaces for hourly when selling surface.
These are permit only lots.
Oh, these
Yes.
are permit only, okay, these are not the commingled ones.
No, these are not the paid
Okay.
ones.
But like Burton, is this-
Yeah, the base camp.
Are they coming?
yeah, they're commingled, yeah, you got base camp, library.
Yeah.
Bert Ernie's is the one behind.
Yeah.
Bert Ernie's.
Behind the union, yeah.
So you could
Front
sell, or you have sold 100% of the spaces in a lot that would also be used for hourly parking. That's how we could read
And
it.
so if you look at the one for Burton Ernie's there, you can see it's oversold by 20 permits. I mean, I drive by there relatively often during the day and yeah, I mean, it's always plenty of space in there. So that's one of those lots that is really oversold, but it doesn't seem to be an issue even for hourly people. There's plenty of space there for hourly parkers all the time. There's plenty of space there that if you have a permit, and you show up, you're gonna find a spot. So it really depends on some of the areas. So, you know, some of the areas, you know, if we're 100% sold, those spots are pretty much 100% filled all the time. So we don't want to oversell those. But some lots like that one, you know, we can oversell that and we're not really too concerned about there ever being enough space.
Are the permits till 5 or are they 24 hours? If you would buy a permit, you have that's your spot for 24 hours a day.
Well,
There's enforcement from 8 to 5.
Okay, so if I have a place and I drive up at 6:30 and there isn't a place to park, they don't get, I guess what I'm saying, if I worked till late and I came to into the parking lot and there weren't any spaces, no one would be ticketed for parking in the permit area.
Not after 5, no. City, it's in the city code that parking enforcement is allowed.
Where does residential fit into this whole thing? Cause they pay.
It's not part of this equation. We did look at your residential parking, and those districts are created by petition, so it depends on where the residents may want a district established. And I can't remember what the term is.
and there's not, I would say there's not really I think a dedicated number of spaces technically in a residential district. You are not necessarily limited, but somewhat limited on the number of permits you could have for your household. So it's kind of a different game.
But
You can only buy one if you live in
right,
that.
but Jones are representative for the
So are we gonna
residential.
see a different for residential parking?
I don't think we outline the residential districts.
They're just too varied. You know, we have I mean, they're all residential parking districts, yes, but they're all impacted, I guess, differently.
Is there a way that I could actually see where they are? Do you have a map or? I'm just curious where
Yeah,
all
I think we have,
We could get you one.
that'd be
Let's
great.
maybe add that to a future agenda and make it
Yes,
to
that'd be
talk
great,
about
yeah.
residential. Okay.
Yeah, cause I think it's a big deal. Those are our closest neighbors to downtown. I know that the evening stuff affects probably those residential things. I know that, don't some of you go up and like up by Hawthorne and do traffic control?
Mhm.
No, okay.
we ticket, we enforce. That if somebody's parked there and they're not supposed to be, they're gonna get a ticket, you know? We don't conduct traffic control.
I guess I should say, are you doing patrol in all the neighborhoods or just ones when someone complains about them?
No, they're hitting the neighborhoods pretty regularly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do act.
That'd be a nice piece to, I mean, cause we obviously think it's
I-
important enough, we have someone represented on the board, they pay money. They have
We
big
do have
voices,
issues, as you know.
Right.
so I would like to make that on the agenda item sometime.
So I guess my question tonight, and we can discuss it further, is the enforcement that on residential is 8 to 5 also?
Yes.
Now, they might shoot me for saying this, but PD has the ability to issue parking tickets 24/7.
Right,
And
we've
they,
gotten
and
some
they
tickets.
have issued parking tickets, events at the Civic Center and other areas. But, they're limited on, what their call volume is and everything, so. We again just don't have the budget to be sticking somebody out on overtime. In some of these areas, we're trying to figure out a way to better work those, let's just say after hour areas in. But there's, you start making a list of those after hour areas, and the list starts getting pretty long and a lot of hours. And then, you're not out there for the entire event. So there's a lot of hurdles to figure out on that.
Right, we live right across from the Civic Center on Stewart and Getchell. And really, I don't know why we have residential parking, because the problem is on the weekends and the evenings with the Civic Center.
Well, that's so
And we
part
can
of,
discuss that at.
no, and I'm more than happy, but that's the reason why Getchell is wide open at 5 o'clock. And that's where we've asked the Civic Center to funnel to encourage their customers to go and park, because that's part of the reason why the Getchell garage is there. So when
Right.
the Civic Center fills up, but we know human nature is they want the closest
Empty spot.
So we'll definitely have to talk about residential.
Yeah, I don't want to take it away from today.
Any other questions on parking lots?
Do we have access to this information?
Yeah, we'll post this as part of the meeting minutes. So number of permits in the parking garage, 6 in Getchell, 840 total spaces, 588 spaces available for permit holders, 564 active permit holders. 15th Street garage is not, we put the information there, but it's not open to the public because state fund buys out the majority of those permits. So it's not really listed in this, but we have 366 spaces there. State fund purchases 350 of them. So there's, the 16 spaces that can be used. Jackson Street garage is permit only. We have 180 spaces with 199 active permit holders and a long waiting list for permits in that garage. Medical arts, the top deck is permit only, and the bottom spaces is just paid park. The 6th Avenue there, we were oversold by, was that 95?
95 permits.
So
oversold by 95 based on the number of spaces that we would allocate for permits.
yes. Because we need to leave a certain number of spaces open for the public to come and go and pay to park.
Any questions? Let's keep going since we're getting close to that.
Start with these, Chris.
Yep. So these are some operational changes. A lot of these were sort of on their way already and discussed with the city commission before this committee was a thing. So the first one is the office move. So that one's done. The second one is our one rate, one zone idea. So, right now, if you've used the parking app, there's a dozen or so different zones, and you got to kind of know where you're at if you're going to use the app. So we're looking to simplify that and get rid of all those extra zones. It'll be one zone for the whole, essentially, enforcement area. That'll include streets, lots, and garages. So if you either go onto the app or you use one of the kiosks, you'll be able just to have the one zone. You pay for your time. If you want to move from there and somewhere else, you still have time on. then you're still good. And then part of that is without the first hour free. So opening up that idea sort of came, right, there was a balance in how do we balance out making it sort of a one-stop shop of parking.
So the confusion with that is I can pay for 4 hours of parking to park on Last Chance Gulch.
Mhm.
For 4 hours.
Yes.
In front of a business.
Yes.
That defeats every.
You can do that now.
Yeah, you can already do.
You can pay for a whole 8 hours downtown and park in one spot
On the street.
on the street.
On the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can already do that. That's, I mean, unfortunately, the nature of, you can't do it in a 2-hour spot, right? But if you're paying, you could potentially, yeah, stay there all day. So the, the concept behind the pay to park is to encourage turnover, right? So if it was just all 2-hour parking, then yeah, maybe you'd have to move to the next space up or whatever. But if you know that you're gonna have to pay, you're a lot less likely to sit there all day and, you know, sip on coffee and read a book in the same spot all day long. So the pay to park concept is what encourages the turnover to keep the spaces open and moving.
I have a question about the free parking, but do you want to finish your?
Sure, we'll go through. So the other things we're working on is we're in the middle right now of a software conversion. It'll be for all of our permits and our enforcement. And so you'll have essentially to do everything online. So right now there's a lot of in-person, on the phone, manual processes for permits and paying tickets and all that kind of stuff. So we just kicked off implementation with the new software, so we're about to get all in the setup mode of everything. But you'll have the ability to go online, apply for a permit, manage your permit. You would put your own license plates in. If you get a new plate, you go on and change your plate number. If you have multiple vehicles, you can manage how many plates you need to be tied to that one permit. Tickets you'll be able to pay online.
And also on the app. Is that the same thing?
So, no, and we were disappointed by that too. So that was one of the first questions I asked was, so we already have your app, because it is gonna be the same company that does the app. But their app platform to pay for the parking, unfortunately, is not the same platform that runs their permits and their enforcement, so. It'll be a website, and so we'll put a link essentially on the city's website to take you right to the portal for both permits and to pay tickets and everything, so. You'll still only have to go to the city's website in order to get there.
Can you do a portal from the app to the website?
We can try. I've asked that too, so that's something we'll talk about during our implementation. And I'll be pushing pretty hard for to at least get a link in the app.
So Sandy, we didn't understand this either.
Right.
They gave us this. There's different security protocols for the two different apps, and we're just like, doesn't quite make sense because you're paying for your parking with a credit card just like you're paying for it.
It's right there. It's so easy to go pay ticket.
But it has to do with some of your personal information as an account holder, I think is the extra layer of security there. And that's why I still don't think it, you know, simplistic me thinks that shouldn't be that big a leap that you could have everything in one app. You could just have one app and say pay ticket or pay bill or something like that. And at least it would take you to the place you wanted to instead of having two places to go.
So I can't pay my permit on there. I'd have to go to the website.
You can still pay on your phone. It's just gonna be a link to a web.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't be able to go to the parking app right now and pay for your permit. And you, at this point, conceptually, would not be able to do that once we get this in place, but we're gonna push to at least get something on the app to take you to the point. So,
And do we have any ability to track down people that don't pay their bills by license plate?
So that's part of the reason why we're doing the So the part of the registration of, for a permit or whatever is all linked to the license plates. There's other reasons, but we're getting now, the state is changing their way of reporting as well electronically, so there's gonna be some talking back and forth between, so it's like 8 cents. So periodically, we can run this report for 8 cents per license plate, and they'll shoot us the address information for the license plate holder. And then we can send out those, past due bills for parking tickets. One of the things that we have on this app, so that's for parking tickets, but if you're a permit holder and you haven't paid your parking, it won't let you renew your parking space until you come in good standing with your parking. But it also, if you have parking tickets on top of that, it'll also link there, so you'll have to pay your parking tickets before you can re-up your permit as well.
It's gonna be a little bit of a chunk of revenue that we haven't had access to.
Hopefully,
So hopefully, yeah.
that's our goal, is to capture a lot of that unpaid revenue that we just don't realize.
Well, we have discussed this in the BID, the one rate, one zone, particularly if there isn't a limit on how long you can park. Makes no sense to us from a commerce standpoint. Your most valuable parking space is the one in front of your business. And if there's somebody parked there all day, you're losing business. That should have a turnover. It should be more expensive, but for instance, along Last Chance Gulch, than back in the back parking lots that are back from your commerce center. And we had a consultant come and give a consultant come that we paid for when we did the master plan, who said that exact thing. One of the most valuable things a business can have is a parking space in front of their business, and it has to turn over. So one rate, one zone, it's not working in that.
So if I could,
Okay.
so I read the report. I've read the report. And yeah, the goal is to have essentially an 85% turnover rate, I think is what that report said. And you accomplish that through the rates that people pay, not necessarily through the amount of time. So if you get to the point where you're seeing that people are parking there for 4 or 6 or 8 hours at a time, then obviously your rate is not high enough because you're not discouraging them from leaving.
Right.
So it's something that we could address from a rate perspective. So I think they're connected, but I don't think they're the same thing. We can have one rate in one zone, and if our problem is that people are parking too long in one place, then we address the rate that everybody pays, not the length of time that they're allowed to be there. And so if they have to pay, $10 instead of $2 to stay there, then they'll be less likely to stay there. But the concept stays the same. Everybody then would have to pay $10 if they wanted to stay there that long. Right.
But, okay. Yeah, I mean, but if the rate is the same in the Martin Ernie's parking lot as it is to park in front of the business,
I think it's,
that does not encourage
but
open spaces.
but we've done this multiple times. We've done them, an hour. Oh, it's not enough time. It's too much time at 2 hours. What I would say is we need to work on education. So if we find somebody who's there consistently, I mean, we need to encourage business owners to say, this person parks here every day, they're an employee. What choices do they have to go somewhere else, or educating them versus changing the rates? I guess you look at, the 20 or 30 people that are abusing the system by parking there all day. Or do we say to the customers, we want to come down, one rate, one place, go for it. So all of a sudden, it's not confusing for the customers to come down. They can say, oh, I can put in money here, I can move anywhere along. Is the garage also an hour for $1?
It will be, yeah.
Yeah, and then if you tell people like, hey, you could be covered parking for $1, that's gonna push some people around a little bit.
So that's part of the idea as well.
But I would like to see a group of people who like looks at things and, well, who are the offenders? And most of the offenders often are business owners. You know, and go around and say, really, you want to take your best parking spot and leave yourself there for 3 hours? Because it's cheap. And I mean, I like the idea of one zone, one price for the customer, because it is confusing. You watch them, you know, in the base camp versus the front of Birds and Beasley's. You know, you'd watch someone get out of their car and go to the base camp kiosk, but they're really parked in front of Birds and Beasley's, and they don't know they just didn't pay for that right lot. So,
Well, there is a way to, I mean, you can't limit with a sign, you can say. But it gets.
I mean, Missoula used to have
it
something that
gets-
said,
it gets complicated.
yeah, Missoula used to have little tickets that said, do you know, you parking here has cost this merchant, you know, $200. Because just those kind of things where people don't think about them.
So who's parking for 8 hours downtown? Is it the
Employees.
employees?
Some employees. But again, if you went to those employees and we know who they are and said, did you know that you could park here? And it'd be closer, or you could park here.
So part of the question too, Sandy, sorry to interrupt, but is kind of relates to our next point on there is are they actually paying for their 8 hours? And if they're not, are they being ticketed? And you know, we're all humans, and you know, going through and talking and checking every license plate is difficult. But the license plate reader that's going to go on our parking enforcement vehicle, that's going to be a mounted system that's going to read every license plate. So I think we're going to see a lot or increased enforcement, if you will, for those people that are abusing the system. And with that, I think we'll get some education or some more compliance out of them for that. So that's another part of the question. Then the other part of the question is one of the reasons that the Park Advisory Committee was formed to try to have that discussion about employee parking downtown and where to make it you know, attractive for them to purposely move them out of these prime areas into someplace other area, because we're making it more attractive because potentially it's cheaper or what have you. So I think some of this, if we're talking purely employees, there's several prongs that we can use to try to address the issues that we're having. You know, I haven't heard of many people, you know, calling and saying, you know, this car's always parked here or what have you. So we haven't, I guess, seen it as a big issue that we've been, you know, hearing a lot about it. But again, I think we're going to be more efficient with our license plate reader, our new permits online. You know, everything's going to be a lot more streamlined, where we have found with our current system there's a few little hiccups that disseminating data from passport to Flowbird to ticket track has been less than
So Seth, to your point, I think one of the good things about this committee is that, you know, the pay to park concept, even the 1 rate 1 zone. If your input is that you think we should limit the amount of time that people should be allowed to park, even in the pay to park areas, well, I think you have every right to request that to be on an agenda for you to discuss as a committee, to recommend to the commission, to tell us to change our policy for pay to park.
Sure.
Right. So it's not something that you could pursue. Right. It's just, that's not the way it's ever worked, really. Right. So there's never been a time limit technically on pay to park. And, you know, even us as staff, we may have different viewpoints on what, you know, those urging points are on the term rates. But if that's something that you'd like to pursue, you have every chance to do it as a committee.
Sure.
To try.
So if someone paid $1 an hour and they worked full time downtown, would that be cheaper or more expensive to buy a permit versus doing the meter? So it's $40 for 4 hours of it. Can they get a permit in the garage for $40?
So you're saying if they wanted to pay their $1 an hour to park all day on the, so yeah, I mean $8 or so a day.
I'm an employee. I go down and I'm saying I work 40 hours a week.
$40 a week and then it'd be $200 a month.
Okay, so it's,
It
we
would
can
be
direct.
cheaper to get a permit.
That's what we need to do is then take those people on.
Yeah, I would
Educate 'em.
say this one rate, one zone needs just a little more wordage on there for hourly parking, because it's really not one rate, one zone. Because
Right.
permit parking is
Yes.
a different rate in different zones.
Correct, it is
And
just
so-
for hours.
Yeah, so to save money, we wanna drive employees to permitted zones,
Right,
not the hourly spots.
right.
So that
And we need to make it
multiple-
cheaper so that,
Yeah, and street permits start at $60 a month. So yeah, that it would be worth it to get a street permit over a paying every day.
and a lot of that is educating. I mean, I think we need to get input from the employers and say, you know, you park a lot of people.
So, Joanne, right?
John,
Joan?
Joan.
So Joan, to your question earlier, being the residential person, right? So, I just thought about this as you were talking before about some after hours enforcement. Our hope is that by converting some of these softwares and by getting the license plate reader technology on our vehicle, we're gonna open up a lot of efficiencies in our enforcement. And so there may be an option at some point down the road that if we get to the point that, you know, one or two of our 3 PCOs can really manage the entire enforcement area just fine without necessarily needing that third one in the main hours of the day. It's something we could look at to do like a split shift in order to have the third person working maybe until 9 o'clock at night or something. So that we could visit those outside districts where you might have issues in the evenings. So I think that making some of these changes are gonna open up some options for us to address the issues that you would have in those areas.
That'd be great. Otherwise, I don't see any value in residential parking, having residential parking.
if you can't use it, you
Yeah,
pay for it.
and,
You can't kick them out.
Well,
right,
and I think the residential parking in its inception was primarily to address Blue Cross Blue Shield and some of those other
Yeah.
places that were during business hours.
correct, so, yeah.
And so this civic center, this, other farmers market and everything, I don't think we're contemplated on how that would be funded or staffed. Because you look now and there's still one street that we're getting ready to discuss that still has no parking on one side, 8 to 5. And I know that was because of Blue Cross Blue Shield. It just didn't get taken down with the other stuff that once Blue Cross Blue Shield left. So there's remnants of some of the past, challenges that are still out there that we just have to take one by one and we'll address and we'll come up with the best solution that we can to make it, workable for everyone.
So can I go back to the one last month? David, you insured us that there would be 1 hour free
And
parking.
I misspoke on that.
Okay,
I'm
well, I think we
sorry.
need to look at,
So we have
We have
another
something
slide
coming up.
coming up
okay,
that I think will.
yeah, let's do that because
help.
Great, let's go to it.
So since I was the one that misspoke last month. So in looking at some of the public comments and, removing the first hour free in certain lots and garages. We looked around at what other communities were doing and we found this, I think it was a Boise, maybe, where they did first 15 minutes free everywhere for every license plate. And, a lot of the public comment, if you read through them all, there was a lot of more 15-minute free spaces, more in and outs type thing. And so we thought, well, this is something that we can propose to not only this committee, but the commission to help mitigate removing that first hour free in those other areas so that we can, and then this gives it to everyone. So you're not just restricted to a parking lot or a garage to use that, first hour free. This now across the zone, wherever you're parked, if you wanna stop in and at the fire tower or the hub to get your coffee, this 15 minutes applies.
So you only do it once a day, right?
Once
Once
a
a
day,
day. yeah.
per license plate.
And you still, yeah, so you still have to put your plate in right when you get there, just like you would do now for your first hour free in some of those lots.
This is where
So-
the having it happen would
Yeah.
be.
So it's not free. You have to pay 15 cents
No.
if you're
No,
using
no.
the app.
No,
Yeah.
we're,
No, so I've asked them about that because that's not supposed to happen.
Okay.
So I saw one comment in those comments where somebody said that, your first hour free is not really free because they charge you the 15 cents. So you as the customer are not supposed to be getting charged that 15 cents if all you do is that free time. So I've asked them to look into it. I've never heard that complaint before. And I would find it really hard to believe that if that was happening a lot, that we wouldn't be hearing all the
It's,
time.
it's happening, trust me.
is it?
Yes, I can show you the receipts.
Well, we're looking into that because that comment that we got was the first time
Yeah,
that we. had
yeah,
heard
that's the
that.
first time we've ever heard
Yeah,
it.
it's,
Well, I would like
Yeah.
us to consider 20 minutes or a half hour instead of 15. By the time you get out of your car, you get your stuff, you stand in front of the kiosk, which takes you 2 minutes to go
Oh, come
through.
on, it doesn't take 2 minutes.
It does. You have you watch me. I use quarters because
Well,
Yeah,
we'll
I can
get
barely
you-
get out with
we'll
quarters.
Get your app out.
I'm not using money. I'm not gonna use money.
Well,
8
let's
cents.
save some brainstorming till
Yeah.
later. I wanna get through the presentation from the city. Okay, so you're saying 15 minutes free everywhere, but that requires registration. It's
Yes.
not a 15-minute grace period.
No.
Correct.
Okay. it's
Well, I
required.
mean,
Because
it's
we
a
don't
grace
know.
period, but in
But you
order to
still
get
have
the
to
grace
take them.
period, you have to put your plate in. That's the only way that the
I-
system is gonna know that
When you started.
when you started your 15 minutes.
Okay,
Because you could be parked there for 4 hours.
If we
yeah, if we
happen
don't
to
go
come
by, yeah,
yeah.
so, but it's, okay.
Except the current 15 minutes, say by the US Bank on that, where you go around the corner. You don't have to put that in the kiosk at this
No, if
point.
it's a posted
We're- yeah.
15-minute
Are we still
parking,
keeping all those zones?
well, those would stay. Yeah, those 15-minute posted zones would stay.
Okay.
Then you don't have to pay for,
What about like the 1 hour parking on Broadway? Will all those little freebies still be free?
Well, so there is another, so the next part, moving individual, so yes, there are some 1 hour.
Where we have
Parking.
where we have the 2 hour, 15-minute, 1 hour, whatever, those are.
Those are
So we're not adding kiosks.
Alright.
So we're not adding kiosks to them, so if
But those-
there's,
Those will be chalked though,
Can we chalk again?
no,
Oh.
our LTR does it electronic,
Okay,
so if we go by,
chalk.
Go chalk it.
um,
it'd be electronic chalk.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
And
That's
then
great.
go
I mean, if people are managing that, then they know, then they can
Right.
go, wait a minute.
So I think this is again, so having this LPR and this more streamlined system, I think this is where we're going to get rid of some of our bad actors. And, really kind of get this turnover going because they're gonna start seeing that, there's a lot more available time to, basically enforce. So,
So to really clarify, yes, if you're in a pay to park spot, you have to put your plate in to still get your 15 minutes. If you're in a traditional 15-minute or 2 hour spot, you don't have to put your plate in. But those will still be managed by our license plate
Yeah.
stuff. But you won't have to put your plate in for those. They're not gonna be designated as pay to park.
Right, but if you know someone's circling, you're bound to be a little more
Right.
on top.
And so the next part of that, so we have a lot of those still individual standing meters all around. So one of our proposals is gonna be that we start to remove those. And those would become 2 hour parking. So not paid 2 hour free parking.
So like down by Women's Park and stuff.
There's some along Lawrence, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a couple along Lawrence, there's some
Alright.
along
So you're
Ladder.
getting rid of someone having to take and get the money out of it.
Correct. So and
How do you
again, goes
enforce
to simplifying.
again, it will be chalk time. So as the car goes by, it'll chalk electronically the license plate. And then if we go by again, if they're 2 hours and 15
that-
minutes, they get ticked.
So that would be an option in front of businesses to limit it to 2 hours. Flat rate. If that,
If there's a sign.
Well, yeah, so
Yeah.
technologically, yes, if that was something that you put on a future agenda, it went to the commission, the
okay.
commission directed us to do that. then yeah, technologically, we have the ability to limit even the pay to park to 2 hours.
2
at a
hours.
time.
Okay, that's great.
So yeah, so that's another part of our hopefully give and take on this idea of one rate, one zone.
It's just in the past,
Then just pay
having
3 hours.
PCOs walking
And
and
15
talking all
minutes.
those vehicles.
Yeah,
Is not feasible, but now with a vehicle that's, and again, I think I said this last time, but why they tested it this way, so the cameras going onto the vehicles can catch a license plate as long as we're driving less than 120 miles an hour.
that's pretty good.
So
Have a lights on.
you know, where 120 miles an hour came from, I don't know, but for that point is they're very accurate. We sat through numerous presentations of obscured plates that obviously looked like they had a boat or a trailer and they missed the ball and hit the plate was their license plate was their catcher's mitt.
And we'll have access to that data, so you can say, here's someone who's constantly, here's an issue. I mean, we have something, you'll have the access to that data. So if Seth
We-
calls and says,
We might.
no, not us, no, you,
Yeah.
yeah, you, I'm just saying,
We should, yeah.
I'm just trying to think of managing.
Sandy really wants everybody's license.
No, I do not want everyone's.
Now we know what
Yeah,
she's
so
doing in
we're-
retirement.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten really, like I said, we literally just had a kickoff call this week for implementing, so we're getting the setup, collecting data, that kind of stuff. But yeah, there are a lot of metrics that'll come out, analytical type metrics that'll come with it.
And sets your prime areas, it'll show us. Cause it'll take in those chalk times when it reads those license plates. It'll tell us how long on average a parker is parking in front of, whatever building or whatever block.
That's important.
So it'll show us if we're, like you said, if we have a predominantly on the 400 block that people are parking for 6 hours at a time or whatever, we can adjust that then. And then we can make that block potentially, some other restriction on that block to promote people to move along.
So what, you just got this technology?
Or we don't technically.
We don't have
have
it
it.
Technically got any-
Okay, so when you get it, that's very useful. It's
Yeah.
gonna be really useful.
I mean, I think we can look at individual problems and say
Yeah.
like where, you go to Joan and say, look, everybody's down there and it's always on Friday night at the Civic Center. Well, then it's educating the Civic Center. It's getting someone down there a ticket. Again, I would like to, I don't know when we can do it before someone decides 15 minutes. I think if we said like 30 minutes, I think at the library, huge business for downtown, 25,000 people a month use that building. You can't park, get across the street and get back in 15 minutes and punch in your number.
So
So
here's.
how much
as
revenue
a-
do we lose?
As a customer, I understand. As a staff person responsible for making sure this division doesn't go under. My concern with 30 minutes as an idea is that we essentially will lose 80% of our revenue for on-street parking.
Okay, that's good to know. What's 20 minutes
So-
do for you? No, I'm serious. I'm
So
thinking
I-
psychologically.
I mean, so we've looked at all the numbers of what does the first hour free cost us. I mean, it's a significant dollar. And so even going down to 30 minutes is, I mean, a lot of, you could get a lot of stuff done in your 30 minutes that you would have down there, that you would essentially never have to pay to park to go. If you're gonna go get coffee, if you just need to run into the library to either get a book or return a
That's what
book,
people
print
said.
something off.
Yeah.
So
But if the goal is, we save some money, but we don't have any customers, that doesn't help us. If we have customers that are going like, I got it, I can get down there, I can
again, the trade-off.
sprint, it's a trade-off, but
The trade-off, as we're proposing, is all the extra 2 hour free parking that's gonna be available. So we have, I think, 175 of those individual meters.
well, there's
So
a
there's
reason
gonna-
no one's using them, it's because it's not in a convenient spot.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But it's free, and if you
But it
want, if you
will
don't
be
wanna
free.
pay, then you walk a block.
Look at our customers.
Okay,
So
let's,
anyway,
we're getting close. I
Yeah.
think we're gonna go just to 5:30, or
Yes.
how many more slides do you have?
A couple.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
wanna clarify here, so these are proposed changes, like these have,
We'll be bringing these up next week to the commission as these are some ideas that we'd like to move forward with from
Okay.
an operational.
So if a member of the public has comments on that, that would be next week's commission meeting or?
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay,
or
so there is space for modification on the 15 minutes free.
well, there's space, but again, we gotta present not only the customer side, but we gotta look at it, like we're the business owner. And we can't give away everything for free. We have to cover all that staff time, we gotta cover on our day-to-day expenses. And we're gonna have to figure out a way to figure out how to pay for that deferred maintenance on these structures that people are using. Because if we don't, then the structures are gonna have to be closed because they're gonna get too far beyond our ability to maintain them. So this is, again, we see.
Well, I'd like to see some hard numbers comparing, what did we pay for the free, what did we lose with the free parking? Currently, which we have now, the first hour free in those lots. Versus what would we gain if they're 15 minutes? What would we gain if they're 20, 30, whatever? To kind of see if it shakes out.
I can do my best to estimate what we would gain. So we can pull what do we lose with the first hour free. That's something that we can pull out of the system. We've done
Well, yeah, can you tell that you said 85% of people don't stay there longer than an hour?
Well, what we're gonna have to pull is how many license plates were entered into the system in a day.
Right.
And then we're gonna have to take off that revenue. And that would be how much we would be basically losing in a day on average. And then we would have to, back out what we were losing in just those a couple lots and garages. So
Yeah, but we can do some estimates between now and.
Because in theory, the employees will be in some of those garages where you're getting, people are gonna be using it more. I mean, everything on this thing is like, I hate to park and pay for parking and shop. I mean, that's what everyone says, and we can have all the free parking we
but there
want.
was only 257 comments, so it's not everyone.
Okay.
Except I was pretty amazed that you had 257. And they
Yeah.
all basically said the same thing, in my mind. I know you broke it down differently, but that they don't want to pay for parking. And I guess, I don't know, you might have interpreted it differently, but I think there's a whole lot of education that needs to go on about why we have parking. What does it get you when you park? Are there ways that we can make it more comfortable for people to park and use the kiosk and all those things? So I mean, what would be a large number of responses when you're asking for input? I know there's 30,000 people in town or whatever, but I mean, to me, it just like I never knew a lot about parking and the issues that until I moved downtown and had residential parking came up.
We get about 9,000 transactions per month on the app.
Right, but I mean, you're just saying these people who are complaining.
Well, there was no positive comments.
Yeah. So I guess, so to your question about what would be a large number, so to give you an idea, so we have, so if you figure 9,000 transaction, that's probably the same, 1,000 or 2,000 people that use it, every day.
Well, I guess I wouldn't ask for it if it's not meaningful, or I know you probably have to have public comment when you're changing rules and all of that, but if people take the time to fill these out and they're not important.
Well, we're not saying they're not important.
Or maybe important's the
we
wrong
have-
word, but that they don't
We have
make
to
you
make sure
change
that
your
we pay
mind.
our bills.
Well, let's look at the
Right.
difference of what the free parking is costing us now,
Okay,
what things
Yeah,
are doing,
sorry.
and then the
Let's-
decision can be made better.
great. Let's talk about this more at the next meeting. Do you want to show us your quick slides, and then I want to save some time for public comment and
So
some time to talk about
The
next
last
agenda.
slides were just a recap of the public comment.
So Copilot
So-
AI.
Yeah.
Took all those comments and put them in these categories.
Cool. And this PowerPoint will be posted online for all to see? Or,
With the minutes, yeah.
great. Okay. So, looking at our agenda, we are kind of rushing the public comments review, but that's what we were just kind of ending with, was talking about.
But we can,
Let's David, did you have some summary statements about the 156 respondents who gave public comment?
Yeah, I mean, the topics were first hour free parking, strong opposition to removing it, impact to businesses and employees. You know, that's one of the other topics that this parking committee was formed to address as we move on. Parking meters and kiosks, cost and feasibility, alternate parking solutions, general opposition to paid parking, accessibility and safety, support for simplification, registration and enforcement, supply and demand pricing, additional feedback and concerns. So I guess one of the things that I want to just say is what we're proposing right now is not going to be, set in stone. But we have to set something so that we have basically some a data point. It doesn't mean that, some of the cities that we looked at, they do during certain hours, 8 to 10, 11:30 to 2, are the prices go up. I mean, that's just the way they're set up so that prime parking is turning over more during those prime times. I'm not saying that that's what we need to do, but there's a lot of examples out there of what other cities, bigger and smaller, are doing with their parking that we can consider to try to mitigate not only the public comments and concerns, this committee's concerns, but also to mitigate our concerns about being able to pay the bills on the monthly, every month and on a yearly basis, so that this year we have no capital projects. We don't have the money for it. We need to get to a point where we have money to do capital projects so that these facilities stay there, or else we might end up having gravel lots because it's just not to point the fingers at anyone, but we all need to come together collectively and come up with a solution that may not satisfy everybody, but meets certain goals by.
So where does the education piece fit into this, where we educate the property owners and the business owners and the public? Is that our committee, or is that
So the chamber, volunteered, committed themselves, however you want, to start to build some PSAs basically, and try to move along this public, or I guess more of the business and downtown education component of this. And then we're working with them as well, because they're already going to be making some videos, is to update the videos that are on our parking website so they're not dated, so you see the folks that you're going to see at the window are the folks you see in the videos. I will not be participating in them because I have a face for radio and not for video. So but
well, I would just like to see your group and us and the chamber, whoever, just saying if Seth has issues because of his thing, that we address it, and we maybe a group that's like.
Maybe we can
Yeah.
invite the chamber to the next meeting, since I was not aware of that either, or is
No.
there another
So,
committee meeting?
So
happening
Callie
next
is on the meetings. She's
She's out of town. She said she's gonna come next week.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we can talk about that.
Yeah.
next time.
But there,
Okay.
there was a proposal to use Grand Street kids to produce like.
Cause
these
they can
videos.
drive?
What's that?
Sorry.
Their parents have to drop them off somewhere, so.
Well, let me just real quick, when I moved from Birds and Beasley's, from where Brooklyn Pizza was to where I am now, our huge concern was we had, free parking across the street. We had free parking in front of us basically, and we had a lot. And we were moving over to about, 8 spots and a hill. And we're like, oh my God. And what did people say? You got so much more parking over here. And I'm like, seriously? But the perception somehow in their mind was that there was parking and it was easier to get to. Why climb up a hill and some steps? But so we just have to present it right.
It's very difficult
Yeah. I mean,
to understand what somebody's gonna think or see.
right. So what we need to find out is if somebody has an issue, we need to go to them and say, before you start the cavalry trying to get us something, what can we do? What is your issue? What's your problem? And work that so we can get more people downtown. So.
Well, just to a point, our kiosk numbers have never, since we've come out of COVID, have never dipped. They've always been on a steady increase of the users and the users of the app. So, you know, we haven't seen the dip that we have been told is out there. So again, it's one of those things, how do we collectively come together and figure out a workable solution for everyone?
All right, so on our agenda, we still need to talk about the process for giving recommendations to the commission in December. And we need to talk about our next agenda items, and then there's something called public communications. Is that public comment? Oh, okay. So let's quickly talk about this December recommendation. Can I speak into that?
Sure, Madam Chair, and for the rest of the board, this was the concept I was referring to at the outset of the meeting about the annual report that we're working through with all the commission legislative advisory boards, that it gives you an opportunity as a committee or a board to come forward to the commission with policy level recommendations. And what we're hoping to get from you all is 3 to 5 items that line with the budget process. That's why December was chosen, so that staff can then, and I wish part of the reason I have all this paper with me is I was trying to find the one flow chart. I love them, just ask these two, that I would share with all of you. And that is essentially that this recommendation that would come forward to the commission would give staff an opportunity to participate in vetting. And if the commission were to say, out of these 3 of 5 recommendations that the parking committee has made to us, 2 of them we really do want to consider as a policy making body. We're going to direct the city manager to then ask his staff to vet, consider these items, and ultimately, if there's further meetings or discussions that need to happen so that the commission can go back and forth with recommendations, further recommendations or further information you may provide, the public can weigh in and make public comment on those recommendations from you all. Staff can come back and say, well, we think this is a great idea too. However, these are the implications if we were to implement that policy. And there may be budgetary impacts, there may be staffing impacts, all of the above, resources, expenditures. So through that whole process, ultimately what the goal is to open that conversation up as much as possible through the public meeting process, with the general public being aware of what the recommendation is, and then take into account the staff implication as well. So folding that all into the March and April timeline that we were talking about earlier, where those actual decisions about the transportation department and the parking staffs, I guess, divisions, budgetary decisions are made with the commission and the city manager. So what that looks like for this group, since you're sort of just getting started, what I would say is you're further along in this process from my perspective than many of the boards and committees are when they first get going. And it sounds like you're well on your way to coming up with some concepts or some ideas. What I would ask from all of you and the chair is that you have a standing agenda item at every one of your meetings now and going forward that talks about your annual report. It could be, and call it a check-in, that you essentially say, where are we at with our recommendations that we all are working on for the commission come December? And so it's not just something that everybody frantically tries to throw together at the end of the year, heading into December. Oh, it's November, we should have had that all ready to go. I would like for it to be something that's constantly top of mind so that you're continually refining those recommendations you're going to make to the body. It ultimately, what I've seen is it comes up with a better work product. You'll have more public participation potentially that are listening to these meetings, or staff may have greater input. And so by the time December rolls around, or maybe even November, you'll have worked through these recommendations, and they may have started here, but end up way over here by the time you workshopped them, even just periodically for 5-10 minutes at every meeting. So that's it in a big picture concept. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, I have a little process question since it's October, so we have our November meeting.
Yeah.
So anything that we come up with, we would need to vote on and have that notice to the public that we're voting on it.
Correct.
And so is the December timeline, like, can we talk about it in December and vote on it in December? and then it would go to January for the commission, or does it need to get to the commission in January? Because what I'm realizing is we only have November.
Sure. So, and that goes back to your very first question about the bylaws and all of that. You know, we understand that this is a really truncated timeline that you're gonna be working on as a brand new committee. So does it absolutely have to be from November or in December? I would defer to these two because that is a timeline that they were hoping to hit for their budget discussions internally as a department. So I don't want to speak for them. However, I know that with some of the boards and committees, we've had to shift those meeting dates around. And keep in mind too, ultimately, the commission will ask items to end up on a agenda, but it is really the city manager's discretion as to when those items may actually be on the agenda. It's his job to decide of all of these items that need to be visited with the commission about and decisions made. These are the things at this time that have to be on this agenda. So we like to be a little flexible where we can be. So I guess what I'm saying generally is if December is going to be extremely difficult to come up with some sort of policy recommendation, even if it's just a couple at this time from this body, get voted and fully discussed, then that's something that I definitely can work with transportation systems on and the city manager to see if it needs to move out a little bit. I don't want to speak to their timeline that they need to follow internally as well.
I mean, just speaking, I think we could wait, a month. So we can have November's meeting to have some of these other discussions that are gonna get tabled. Or these new items to be discussed so that this committee has a better foundation of information so that, what recommendations are put forward, have the discussion behind them and have the information behind them. So it's not just a kind of a knee-jerk reaction because we have to get them in December.
Okay, well, I would say one more thing too to consider, at least for this first go. It's not that you absolutely can't make recommendations outside of that annual report. So keep that in mind. There are interim processes we can follow. If you guys have a great idea, you work with staff and you have in July something you'd like to bring forward, absolutely, we can work with the committee to get those items on an agenda. And the commission, I'm sure, would be very interested in hearing what this group is working on at any time. It's a matter of resources and time and agenda time, and all of that need to be taken into account. But I would tell you, one of the best pieces of advice I could give you right now is don't try and solve everything at this first go. Pick the one or two very important items that you think will make the greatest impact. Really workshop those as best you can heading into January, so you have the best fully fleshed out idea. What I have seen with other boards and committees, even prior to us trying this grand experiment with the boards project, is it doesn't matter if it's a great idea, if you haven't really thought through the full details and worked with the staff that communicate with you and gotten some good public feedback, and you bring that to the commission, very often it falls flat because the city might already actually be doing a lot of the things that boards and committees recommend. They just aren't doing it in the manner that was recommended. That's not a no, it's just, we're already doing that. Or there are maybe even legal reasons that the city can't proceed with certain items. So the more time you can spend on one or two items, instead of trying to solve 10 things, focus on one or two really important ones to this group, you'll get a better end product with the commission, I promise you.
Okay, and I think you said this, but I want to repeat it. The annual report would happen once a year, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen in December, or does it need to happen in December?
It doesn't sound like these guys are absolute on the December time.
For this
The goal was, just so you're aware, each one of the resolutions for these legislative bodies was designed so that we're committing as a group that we're going to try and get this on an agenda in December, so that the board and committee know that these recommendations are important to the commission. You know that we're all working together to get you there. If it doesn't happen in December because of scheduling reasons, well, that's okay, as long as we get those recommendations in front of the commission. That's important.
Any questions about that, Sandy?
Real quick, where I see a gap is you guys are making decisions, you're making with the information you have. Then you're asking us to make decisions with information that we don't have. And I thought committee, I'm thinking, oh, we could get together with all the people and kind of pound out what we need to do. And there's like, well, shoot, if 3 of us show up, there's a quorum. That means we can't talk about anything. So how do you get your input? How do we get, I guess, how does that work? It just seems like, you're saying, hey, will you recommend this 15-minute thing? And I'm like, well, I don't have any information to make that decision. So how do we have that? How do we fill that gap? Does that
So,
make sense what I'm
so
asking?
that's just our recommendation,
I know, but
and that's just, so we've,
I guess a work session, when do work sessions happen? And is it just with the staff, or can we as a committee be part of those work sessions?
So I think what I started out with was that a lot of these ideas were in motion before the committee was
Right.
thing, right? So we had some operational decisions to make based on things that were just going on day to day. And that's where a lot of these came from. And so our recommendations are not from this standpoint of, well, we're the greedy parking division, we need money. Right. I'm hoping that what you all saw from our presentation of the information was that, yes, there are some things that we would like to change that we think would be operationally efficient for us as staff. But on the other hand, we're also offering all of these other things as the trade-off between the 15-minute free everywhere, a lot, 175 2-hour free spaces to go with it.
Yeah,
So
I get that. I'm just saying, how can we work together without
so again,
passing?
let's just say that the 15-minute is approved. That doesn't mean it's in stone. That means
No,
we
I
can.
guess this is what I'm saying. You tell me 15 minutes is a good idea. I legally now say,
We're not.
yeah, we're
This, they're taking this to the
Yeah.
commission.
right.
So
We're not, the advisory committee has not made an opinion on these issues.
okay.
Correct.
So again, another part of the problem is what we're doing with the annual report. We have a very compressed timeline
Okay.
to get.
I'll
some
just
stuff
trust.
done.
I just want to say, I think we all have
We're
the
more than,
goodness of the parking in the same, we're all the same. We
Yeah.
want it to work.
I have, but sorry, is your annual report, like, is there a transportation annual report that our committee has to have a?
no,
Okay, it's this committee. has
it's,
to have it.
it's,
Okay.
it's your,
That's
it's
what I
your
wanted to
annual
know.
report.
Okay, so let's talk about, well, sorry. Did
Sorry,
you
I
have
just
any
want to say
comments?
one thing. Sandy, what you have highlighted is both the frustration and the beauty of government. We have, this is one thing that we talked about boards training. We've been trying to really advocate to help boards and committees understand. The operations side of things, they still have to fund and pay their bills and move forward with the day-to-day operations. Boards and committees, you're on the legislative side unless you're very distinctly defined as an operational or administrative board, which this is not that. So while you guys can make policy recommendations to the legislative body, the commission can take those into consideration at any time. They can then tell the city manager, we want to turn 180 degrees and go backwards. Not that I'm saying they should, but at some point, there is a bifurcation that's happening here. You are a policy recommendation board for the policy decision makers, which is the commission. These guys on the operational side, they still have to answer to their boss, who's the city manager, and keep the parking division afloat. It is genuinely the #1 frustration with boards and committees I see over and over again. So you're not saying anything that we
Yeah.
haven't all heard.
I just want to say when someone says, oh, you're on the parking committee. I want to say, yes, this is because Chris told us it costs this much money. We got $7 million to keep those garages going. And people go, oh, versus like, you're right, that 25 cents cost me. I think we need to be
It's more
educated.
Information, right.
It's
we
it's
need
not
more
information. We need information because we are representing groups. And you're representing, and we need to say to people, if you want a garage, you want shoveling, you want stuff that costs money. And this is where it has to come from.
Yeah. So we purposely kind of condensed our presentation because we have more information than an hour and a half or 2 hours. Right? We can fit into a meeting. So I think, Sandy, some of these items, if you really want to take a deep dive into, we can in potential future meetings where we have some extra time.
Yeah.
And we're more than happy to provide that information. But as Danae said, because of certain situations, we have to make operational decisions that we think are in the best interest at this point in time. Again, it doesn't mean that it's going to be set in stone. We might find that the 15-minute works, doesn't work, or, you know, who knows, the commission might say, we don't like it at all. You know, get rid of it.
Right, okay.
So, we're just trying to do the best at this point in time, and then as we work together, we've only had 2 meetings. I think it's, you know, we've.
Well, I
had a
appreciate you guys all
compressed
showing up and helping with that helps. So that we,
I think in the future, you'll have more time to both digest and review either the recommendations that we're planning to make or the information that we have. I think at this point, like you said, I mean, it's only the second meeting. And as these things were kind of already in motion, we've given, I think, as much. We didn't have a lot of time to drill down into every little detail of all of these, but we tried to give you the big picture of this is what we're recommending and why we're recommending it that way.
and maybe I just need to drive the AI car.
And then the other
drive
thing-
around. Maybe that's where my goal is, not to be on the committee, but just being the educator.
The information that our new software is gonna be able to provide this committee, huge, as far as reports and, you know, use and blah, 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 is gonna really drive a lot, I think, a lot of the decisions that come out of this committee and of operations, because right now we don't have some of that information. It's a, you know, it's a guess on our part. It's talking to you guys to let us know, hey, yeah, is that spot always taken? Yeah. You know, that's the kind of data that we have now versus we'll have it actually data logged by in a graph or a spreadsheet, however we get that data or what that data looks like. So
Okay, let's talk about agenda items for our next meeting, which will be November 14th at 4 p.m. I heard that we would like to learn more about the residential permits. Is that possible to do by November? Okay. I would like to add the agenda item, check in on annual report, so that can be a standing agenda item. I'd encourage committee members to think about what recommendations that we have. Maybe we could spend a little time brainstorming if we have some recommendations, so we can talk about them a couple times. Other agenda items from committee members that you'd like to see next month?
Chris is gonna bring us some numbers for the 15-minute and the free parking. What did we lose?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
by having, what do we have now? What's the
Yeah.
cost for free
yeah,
parking?
so I'll bring those to the commission meeting next week.
Okay,
Okay,
And then I think maybe if you're, I don't know if we'll have recommendations or not, but one of your items may be to review all of the proposed changes that we'll be presenting next week. So
great,
what-
that would
that'd
be
be good.
great.
what
That'd be
were the-
good.
So if you have some of that data that we could see, that would be good. And, but I think Sandy's asking for the second thing, we'd also like to know what it would cost if it was an hour instead of 15 minutes. Is that something you could do by November
well,
14th?
yeah, so like,
Well,
what
yeah,
is it now? What does the free ones now cost
Right,
us?
what does the 1 hour cost us now?
Right now, and then
And-
what would it be like if it was 15 minutes,
15 or 30.
30 or 20 or whatever, you know, how do you figure that out based on?
I gotta
Numbers,
put my math hat on. Yeah,
you can do it, I feel.
it's one of the best hats I wear.
Any other agenda items for next month's meeting? Steph? No? Okay. Then I would like to open it up to public comment. Thank you for hanging out with us. Did you have anything today?
I don't, thank
Okay.
you. It's been
Yeah.
very, very informative.
All right,
Excellent.
does anybody want to move to adjourn the meeting?
I would love it if you did.
Okay, would anybody like to make a motion?
I still move that we adjourn this meeting.
Great, thank you, Sandy.
I second it.
Says seconds, I hear no opposition, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, guys.
This is
Thank
one of
you,
the
staff.
best meetings I've seen in a while, so good job, you guys.
Cause we all like each other.